Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to the On1 Plugins Upgrade Your Workflow event. I'm Dylan Kotecki and I'm joined by Dan Harlacher.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming.
And we're incredibly excited to showcase all of the new technologies coming in the On1 plugins.
First, let's go over a couple things about this presentation. First off, it's focused on the Professional Plugins series. We'll talk a little bit about Photo Raw, but today we're really talking about the plugins. Today's event is pre-recorded, although we are going to do our best to answer the questions that we hear from users the most. You can also ask your questions right in YouTube during the premiere event, and we'll have people standing by to answer those questions. And the event's probably going to take about 40 to 60 minutes to go from beginning to end. All right, now, before we really dig into the plugins, let's talk a little bit about what is best for you, what's going to fit your workflow the best. So we offer a couple of different solutions, and it really depends on your workflow as to which one or both make the most sense for you. Now, if you don't have an editing application already, or you're looking to switch from an editing application that you already have, then On1 Photo Raw is a great solution for you. It kind of does everything you could imagine: organizing, raw processing, editing, layered workflow, batch processing, the whole 9 yards, all in a single app. Or you might work in an existing workflow using a different workflow tool like Lightroom or Capture One or Photoshop or other pixel-based editors where using our solutions as a plugin works. We don't really care. Our goal is to provide great technology and great features that work no matter where you work. So let's kind of talk about the difference. Photo Raw, as I mentioned, is kind of that hassle-free, one-stop shop for all of your workflow. It's also probably, in my mind, the best place to do batch processing because of the non-destructive nature. We can actually be non-destructive from the very beginning, kind of an end-to-end non-destructive workflow, which can be really handy. And it's something you might lose when you use other editing techniques. But if you work in an existing workflow, then using the plugins is a great solution as well. And we build special features into all the plugins to work inside of those host applications as best as possible. Let's talk about all 5 very quickly. The first one is On1 Effects. It's probably my favorite. It's the granddaddy of them all. Tons and tons of curated professional grade presets to help your photos look great, plus an effects engine under it with over 30 different filters that you can preview and stack and combine however you want. It's the best finishing move for your photos. Then there's NoNoise AI. NoNoise is for removing noise and now for removing blur as well. It'll take your photo, bring back the best detail and the best sharpness without any loss in quality. Then there's Resize. Resize is the next generation of genuine fractals technology. It helps you resize your photo up much larger than the original with better detail and better sharpness than you ever could before. Then there's Portrait AI, which will find every face in your photo and automatically add just the amount of retouching for each face. And finally, On1 HDR for combining multiple photos together very quickly and create the most natural, flawless looking high dynamic range photos. Now you're probably asking where you can actually use these guys. Well, all of them can be used as standalone applications. That means you can launch it from your start bar or from the applications folder on your computer, and you can simply drag and drop photos into it to work on them. But you can also use them as plugins to the most important photo editing apps out there. So things like Photoshop and Photoshop Elements, you can access them in. Also Lightroom Classic, Capture One, Affinity Photo, Apple Photos, and Corel Paint Shop Pro. Now, which ones you can use where varies a little bit just depending on the capabilities of those hosts. There's some things that we can't do in every single application, but keep in mind you can still do everything in the standalone with these. All right. Let's jump in, and I want to show you guys how Effects works, and we'll talk especially about what's new in On1 Effects 2023. Now today I'm going to work mostly out of Lightroom and a little bit out of Photoshop. And the way you send photos from Lightroom or from Photoshop to the plugins is something that we're going to show you how to do now. And it is very similar in the other apps, and we have video tutorials that show you how to do it if you happen to be a Capture One user or an Affinity Photo user. Lots of ways to do that. All right, here we are in Lightroom. I'm going to pick a photo that I want to work on. I'm going to grab this great photo of a church in Iceland, and then to send it to Effects, I simply go up to the File menu, go down to Plugin Extras, and I'm going to select On1 Effects. You'll notice how all the different plugins show up in here. There's Effects, there's HDR, there's NoNoise, there's Portrait, and there's Resize. And because I have Photo Raw installed as well, I also have an option to migrate my Lightroom catalog over to Photo Raw. If that's something that interests you, you can check out the other video tutorials and resources on our website for that. But I'm going to, in this case, send it to On1 Effects. This is always the best way to send your photos from Lightroom to our plugins through the File Plugin Extras menu. It gives us the ability to make sure you're getting the right kind of file, the right settings on that file versus the edit in option. And it also lets us clean up cancels. So let's say you send the photo to us, you make some adjustments, you say, nah, I don't want to do that after all. You hit cancel, you're not left over with a phantom file, but you would if you use the edit in option. So always go through File, Plugin Extras. All right, let's jump into effects here. You'll notice there's an option called Export Options. This lets me control what goes from Lightroom into effects or to any of the plugins. Now keep in mind, we need to be able to work on your adjustments you've made in Lightroom. Most people who work in Lightroom have taken that photo, they've done basic raw and tonal adjustments. You don't want to lose those. You want that to be the basis of the photo that you're going to work on. So we're going to use the first option here called Edit a Copy with Lightroom Settings. But of course, you could also send a copy or even open the original if you wanted to. And then down in the Copy Options section, we can control what kind of file it's going to create. And we'll handle common file types like TIFF or JPEG or a Photoshop file, but my favorite one is the Smart Photo PSD. This is something that is really unique about our plugins. It allows you to re-edit your settings after the fact. It's very, very cool. So I'm going to pick Smart Photo, and I'll hit the OK button. Now, if you always use the same settings, you can uncheck this little Ask Me Every Time box, and it'll just go straight to Effects. Here we are inside of Effects. Let me give you the quick tour. On the left-hand side, you're going to see the preset browser. This is where all those great curated presets live, and they live in different categories based on what you want to do. Simply click on a category to see all the different options. As you mouse over these presets, you'll actually see it apply on top of your photo, so you get a large preview of what those presets look like. That's actually one of the great new features in 2023. On the left-hand side, you'll see the tools for cropping and transforming and retouching, and also my favorite tool, the new Super Select AI, but more on that in just a minute. Then over on the right-hand side, you'll see the Effects stack and the Add Filter button. This is where all the individual filters work. The way Effects works is there are 30 different individual filters, each one very powerful in its own right, but you can stack them on top of each other, control their settings, and then control how they blend together. That's really what creates the recipe or the presets that give you all the power and all those kind of instant one-click, great-looking results. All right, let's show you my favorite new feature, and that is Super Select AI. Super Select takes all of the difficulty out of selecting an area, masking it, and applying an adjustment. It makes it very fast. It's the third tool down on the tool well. I'm just going to select it. And what it does is it's going to highlight all of the different regions that it can find in your photo. So things like sky and water and foliage and ground, or objects like architecture, people, cars, animals, you name it. So let's say I want to make an adjustment to my sky. I simply mouse over the sky. You can see how it highlights red. I click on it, it turns blue, that means that's being selected. Now something to keep in mind is this blue overlay is kind of like a preliminary mask. It's not the final mask, it's just a quick illustration of the region that we're going to work on. So don't agonize if it isn't 100% perfect yet. Then all I do is I just right click, and from the context menu, I'll see all of my local adjustments and all of my filters and all of their styles. It's crazy, you have everything at your fingertips right here. So what do you think we should do? Should we warm it up, maybe?
Warm it up and maybe a little bit of a glow.
Okay, let's see. Well, let's go down. I'm actually going to go down to the glows, and I bet we can do both at once. Let's see. There's probably a warmish glow in here somewhere. There we go. I'm going to grab the rich glow.
It really never gets old, Dano. Just clicking and adding in.
It is pretty crazy, isn't it?
It's super cool.
Yeah. Now, you notice when I add that adjustment over here in my stack, you'll see that glow filter that got inserted, and it got placed with the setting that I asked for, that rich glow. And if you look over here on the little thumbnail, it actually has the mask for the region that it generated. And if we go and we look at that mask, and if I click the view button right here, you'll actually see the mask that it generated. Anything that is clear in the mask is having the effect applied to it. Anything that's red in the mask, it's being hidden from. So there you go. So you can see how it applied to just that sky region for us. Now I can repeat that again, simply by grabbing that Super Select tool, clicking on a different area, and picking what I want. Let's say I want to make the church pop out more. So I'm going to click on the church. I'll right click.
Some dynamic contrast.
Yeah.
A
Let's
little
go to
detail.
dynamic contrast. What's a good looking one? We'll go surreal, so it's
make
really
it
obvious.
really pop.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's tough to see through a recording.
Exactly. So we'll add that. Yeah, while I'm here, might as well turn up that vibrancy even just a little bit more so that red really pops.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. And then, you know, I kind of like that glow we did on the top. We might as well stick something kind of like it on the bottom. I'll click down here on the bottom. Let's go to the glows. This one I want a kind of a darker glow instead. There we go. How about deep forest?
I really like that one.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the before and the after here. So left-hand side is before. Let me put this tool away. So we have before and after.
Hey.
Here's a tip. If you hit the tab key on your keyboard, it'll hide the left and the right-hand side so you can see just the photo by itself. Makes it really easy to kind of judge your before and after like that.
That looks awesome, Dano.
Yeah. Or, of course, you could just hit the preview button to view the whole before and the whole after. That's what I like to do.
Or the backslash key on your keyboard.
Yeah, or the backslash key. That's a great way to do it, too. All right, so that's one of our favorite new tools, the Super Select AI tool. Another great thing that you can do is to use what we call Mask AI. So when we use Super Select, we're physically clicking on different regions. Wouldn't it be cool if you could just tell it by words, by description of what you wanted it to do? I'm going to jump back to Lightroom here and we'll show you how that works. Before we do that though, I want to show you how the smart photos work. So remember, we come back here to Lightroom. Right next to it, you'll see stacked. There's our results. There's the new photo, our new smart photo. There's the original. And watch this. I can take that photo that we created. If I go back to my plugin extras and I send it back to effects, it knows that it's a smart photo. It's already picked open original. I can hit OK. It's going to send that photo back and it's going to be right where we left off. So rather than baking everything in, so it's no longer re-editable, it's completely re-editable. You notice our effect stack is right back where it was, and I could go and I could change or manipulate any of these if I wanted to.
It has all those masks and everything.
Yeah, all the masks.
Perfect.
Everything's just where I left off. So if I wanted to make a change, let's say I want to go to that glow that we did for the foreground and I want to go with a brighter one instead, I can simply change my settings, hit done, and it's going to save that back to that same original Smart Photo PSD and go right back to Lightroom. Lightroom sees it as a Photoshop file, so does Photoshop. So very easy way to interchange the data between the two, but maintain that re-editability. Something very unique to the On1 plugins.
And there it is.
Yeah, there it is with those changes applied. Let me click on it again. There's before and after.
It's so easy.
Yeah. Now, we mentioned we wanted to show you guys how Mask AI works. I'm going to grab a different photo here so I can illustrate this even better. I'm going to send this off to effects. I'll use that same smart photo. And this time, rather than using Super Select, I'm just going to click on the Add Filter button over here. And you notice when I click on Add Filter, there's a new section over here on the left-hand side where it lists out all the stuff that it can find in the photo for me automatically. It can find flora, it can find natural ground, it can find people, it can find animals, and it see how it's automatically found and made masks for all those. So let's say I wanted to make an adjustment to just the horse. So I'm going to check animal on, and then I pick what I want to do. Let's do another rich glow. There we go. And then I can go pick which one I want to apply to it. I'll just use the built-in styles over here. You can see I can mouse over those and I can actually see those being applied in real time. Or I could even do the same thing over here on the left in the preset browser. I can click and it's going to show me all of those same styles. And as I mouse over those, it'll update my preview as well until I pick just the one I want. Yeah.
I didn't even know that, Dan.
Yeah.
I didn't know that yet. That's
See?
cool.
That's why we do these. Everybody learns something new.
Learning something new every day.
So there we go. We added that. Now I can continue to do the same thing. Let's say I want to add a filter to her. I want to change the color of her dress a little bit. So I can just click on Add Filter, and we'll go for People. And this time I want to change the color, so I'm going to use the Replace Color filter. It's going to stick Replace Color in. I'm just going to grab the color out of her dress, kind of that pink color, and then I can increase its saturation and shift its color to really be just what I want it to do.
Sweet.
Pretty cool. Maybe let's darken the foreground, the natural ground in the photo. I'll just hit Add Filter again. This time I'll select Natural Ground. Let's add a tone enhancer to it. And then I'll just grab the exposure slider just to darken that area down a little bit.
More detail.
Yeah.
Nice.
It makes it not so so bright and obvious in
Totally.
photo 2.
A little distracting.
Yeah.
Could be distracting.
And then maybe the last thing, let's add a little bit more green to all the foliage. So I'm going to add another filter here. Let's add it to the flora, and we'll add a color enhancer. And I'm just going to pick the foliage option. That makes it a little more green. See, like that.
Nice.
So there we go. Again, if I hit that Tab key on my keyboard, I can hide everything. See just my photo. And then what was it? Backslash key on the keyboard. Backslash key. And I can see my before and after.
Nice.
Just like that. And I made really complex selections without having to use any brushing tool. I didn't have to think about adding the layer and clicking on the mask and picking on the tool and going through a whole bunch of different tools to do it, to create those masks. But the great power of this is those masks that we generate on each one of those filters are just like any normal mask. So all the stuff you've already learned how to do, you've learned how to use the refine brush and the blur tool and the chisel tool in the past, those all still work. So I can continue to refine those masks. Those masks are not going to be pixel perfect every time. They're going to look really good in most cases, but in sometimes you're trying to do something very, very strong, an adjustment like replacing a background or blurring a background or doing very, very heavy adjustments to your photos, which in general you probably don't want to do. But if you need to for some reason, you might need to refine that mask a little bit to make it pixel perfect for your application. All right, that's our next favorite filter. Now, if you guys are thinking, you're thinking, well, he just picked something over here in the filter to do that, right? That's like a setting, just like any of the other settings. Well, it is. That means you can create presets that take advantage of this too. And that opens up a whole new world. Those are what we call AI adaptive presets. An adaptive preset can target any of those named regions for you automatically. It's crazy powerful. I'm going to show you just a few examples of what you can do. Let me jump back to Lightroom, pick a new photo. Let's use this kind of hip portrait shot. We'll go back to Plugin Extras. We'll send it over to Effects. I'll switch over to my Presets tab, and you notice there's a big AI button right here at the top. That's the AI Adaptive Presets live right in this category. And when I click on it, you'll see subcategories that can do different things or are designed for different types of photos. I have a bunch of different preset categories in here. Most of them come with it. Some are some bonuses. Some are some ones that I made for myself. So your presets may not look exactly like mine. Don't worry about that. All right, let's go in, and I'm going to go to my Outdoor Portraits category here. And again, I can simply just mouse over these presets to actually see it applied to the photo. Now, if you notice what that did is it took the background in the photo and it kind of added a glow to it. See, if I mouse over, a second there's that one.
But it doesn't modify her.
But it doesn't do anything to her. If I go to darken background, it's going to darken the background. Maybe I want to give it kind of that Lomo look. I can do that.
Yeah.
Or there's some other cool ones in here that kind of give it a matte look. But the problem with matte looks a lot of the times is they're still too strong on people. You kind of like it on everything but the people. So these are designed to kind of reduce that on people. Let me show you how it works here. I'm just going to come in here and I'll grab like the glow background one, and we'll click on it. And let's look and see what it adds. So it added 2 different filters. It added a dynamic contrast and it applied just to people. So you can see how she pops out. It adds a little bit of oomph to her.
Yeah.
And then the glow that applies just to the background and darkens it. Nice. Now, I didn't have to do any masks for that. That's just an example of what you can do with adaptive presets. Let me show you on another photo or two here. I'm going to hit cancel just to save us some time. Here's another portrait example where we can actually use it to enhance a background. So a lot of times we all have solid color seamless paper in our studios and we want to be able to have those beautiful backgrounds. Well, we don't have the ability to go out and buy all of those, but there's tons that I could apply just using the texture filter here inside of Effects. So I can simply just mouse over these and you'll see how it's stylizing and changing that background for me, but it's masking her out automatically. It's pretty crazy that it could do that. So I can have that sheet metal background or that concrete background simply by just using those built-in presets. Let me show you on something else here. Let's do a car this time. Not a car, let's do an airplane instead. Cars and airplanes, they're a lot alike.
One flies and one's on the ground.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I've seen you drive. No, just kidding. That was like click and clack. Alrighty. So we have a category in here for, what did we call it? Cars and planes.
Hey.
There we go. So this will automatically find planes, find cars, and do different things to them versus the rest of the photo. So for example, here's what I like called all shined up. It finds the airplane automatically. It's going to clean it up, make it brighter. It's also going to add a little bit of a glow to it, but it's not going to affect any of the rest of the photo. Same thing, maybe I want to go to like a grungy sky preset. There we go. See, it adds a little bit of a grunge look to it, or maybe the vintage glow. And again, these are all adapting to the photo. It changes based on what's in the photo. Pretty fancy. Pretty fancy.
Fancy and handy.
Yes.
That should be a word.
I just made up a new word, I think. All right.
Handy.
All right, let me show you one more, just because I love these things so much. How about a wildlife one? Let's grab this tiger.
Can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong with wildlife. You notice there's a bird and wildlife category. And maybe for this one, I just want to kind of add a rich glow that's going to make the lion pop out a little bit, or the tiger pop out. It's a tiger, not a lion. There we go. I'll click on that. You can see how it's added both a dynamic contrast and a touch of a glow. So he really kind of pops out, looks beautiful.
That fur.
Look at that. And there's before, and there's after. What's really crazy is look at the mask that it generated. This is a complex photo. Lots of little fuzz around the edges, right? Well, look at that. It actually built a very nice, clean mask out of that for us automatically.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
It just doesn't ever get old, just targeting specific subjects and applying stuff. It's
so fun and easy. It's so easy. It always tickles me to when I can do that automatically. All right. Now, there's still even more stuff that's new in effects. Let me show you one more thing before we move on to the next one, and that's the content-aware crop. Now, some of the things we're showing here are actually common. They're going to appear in multiples of the plugins. I'm kind of showing you them here in effects, but they'll appear in other ones. So any place you see crop, you'll see the new content-aware crop as well. I'm going to grab this car. Let's open it up into effects. There we go. Cool shot. I'm going to close my presets here so we have a little bit more room to work with, but it's kind of a long, skinny shot, and it's very, very tight on the left and the right-hand side. If I needed to make like an 8x10 out of this, I'd never be able to do it. I'd have to chop off a bunch of the car. So I'm just going to grab the crop tool. You notice there's a new option in here called content aware. Normally, the crop is stuck to the bounds of the photo. I can't make it go any bigger than the photo, right? Can't crop outwards. Well, you can with content aware. If I turn that on, it's going to let me actually pull those crop handles out and add stuff to the photo that looks realistic. I'm going to zoom out one step here so that we have a little bit more room to work. And I'm just going to grab the edges and I'm going to pull those out a little bit to give us a bit more space on the left and the right, and maybe a little bit more up here on the top too. Nice. So I've added all the way around it. I'll hit the return button here. And now it's going to change my canvas size, and it's going to use this content-aware fill technology to fill in all of those areas. So you can see how it's now seamlessly filled in the left and the right and the top for me automatically.
That looks awesome.
Pretty darn cool, huh? So that's a really handy thing if you need to recompose your photo, or maybe you shot your photo and it was a little bit crooked, you need to level it a little bit. This will allow you to do that without losing any of the photo at all.
That's awesome.
All right. Now that's just a handful of the cool new stuff that is coming in effects. We spent a lot of time on it. Let's go ahead and take a look at NoNoise next. All right. Now for those of you who aren't familiar with NoNoise, let's give you a quick tour of it, show you what it can do, and talk about what's new in it as well. I'm going to start off with this photo. I'm going to zoom in a bit here in Lightroom just so you can take a look at it. You can see this photo has quite a bit of noise in it.
Yeah.
It's pretty darn noisy in that background. And even in the foreground in the eagle, you start to see that noise. Now the problem with noise reduction is typically it ends up having to soften the details in order for it to work. That's what it does. It's basically a blur, and the trick is like, where can you blur, where can't you blur? Well, the beauty of AI is it's become very smart at being able to do that. So let me show you what this would look like if we used NoNoise AI on it instead. We'll access it the same way, go to Plugin Extras, and then go down to NoNoise. When NoNoise opens, it's going to automatically zoom me into 100%. It's going to look at the photo. It's going to figure out all the right settings for me automatically. It's going to pick the right amount of luminance noise reduction, the right amount of detail enhancement, the right amount of color noise reduction, etc. Let me pan over here so you can take a look. There's before. I'll let go, and there's after.
Oh, wow.
That is crazy. Look at that beautiful green background. No noise left in it at all, hence the term no noise.
Yeah.
But when we look at the eagle,
all that
we
detail.
Didn't lose anything.
No.
You know, normally we do that. We might get the background to look like that, but the eagle would just be mush. We'd lose all the detail, but all those tiny little feathers, still
that looks amazing.
Super detailed and sharp in there.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. Now that's no noise, but we've also added what we call Tack Sharp. Tack Sharp is another AI algorithm that will actually de-blur a photo. So if your photo has a little bit of motion blur in it, you know, the camera was wiggling a little bit, or it misfocused a little bit, it can actually counteract that and bring those details back. Let me show you on another photo. We'll use another bird this time, because we all love our wildlife shots. And it typically is one of the places where you get a lot of noise. You're working with a long lens at a very high ISO. Let me pan over here a little bit so you can see there's the before and there's the after.
Yeah.
So again, great job of reducing the noise, but you also notice this photo is just a little bit out of focus.
Just a tad.
It's pretty sharp on the beak, but a little out of focus in the
eyes
background.
Just need
there.
a little more.
Yeah, needs a little bit more. So we'll use Tack Sharp. Now, because we want to use both No Noise and Tack Sharp at the same time, we're going to use the Both tab. Now, the only time I really want to use both is when I need to have both. If my photo is noisy, but not blurry, I would use No Noise. If my photo is blurry, but not noisy, I would use Tack Sharp. I'd only use both in the cases where I need to have them both. So don't think of going to both as your end-all be-all for every photo. Typically, the less processing you do with a photo, the better. So we'll go to the both option. This is a perfect photo for it. Now you notice how the background is still nice and smooth. We've taken all that noise out of it, but we have a ton more sharpness, a ton more crispness in the eagle as well. And we're actually zoomed in pretty close here. Let me go out one more step. There we go, and that kind of gives you a better view of the overall face. So clean background, all the sharpness, all the detail, no artifacts, looks great. And we're actually working on a DNG in this case. So when we sent the photo from Lightroom, it automatically knew it was a raw photo, knew that we were going to NoNoise. One of the benefits of working through that plugin extras menu is it helps you make the right decision about the kind of file that you want to create. So it's actually going to create a DNG. So all the original raw data is still there. So when I go back to Lightroom, I'll have the ability to save all of the highlights that happen to be in the beak of this bird because it was shot a little overexposed. I still have all those great raw details, all the full tonal range, all the full color range when I go back.
That's awesome. Because it does need just maybe a little bit of a
exposure.
It
can use just a little bit more in there. It's a little hot. Yeah. But watch, it'll save that DNG, and when we go back, right there next to it, there's that DNG version. And when I go into develop, that's super close. Not quite so close. When I go back in here to develop, you'll see it still has that full, amazing, 12 or 14-bit color range that this original raw file had in it. So, and awesome. All that detail and all that noise reduction is applied at the deep raw level to that DNG file.
That looks much better.
Yeah. Also in NoNoise, aside from the brand new Tack Sharp algorithm, we've worked to improve the quality and the performance on it. There's a ton of bug fixes and new camera support. Plus, there's also what we call Quick Mask AI. And Quick Mask allows you to use the same masking capabilities that we have with Super Select, but on a layer-by-layer basis. So you could actually take multiple layers inside of NoNoise, multiple copies of your same photo, and apply NoNoise and Tack Sharp in different ways. It's a great way to blend it together. If you need to do a local adjustment, you can do that right inside of NoNoise now. All right, next up, let's talk about resize. All right, resize is near and dear to our hearts. It's really where we started On1 with genuine fractals. Everybody who's been in photography for any time knows about genuine fractals. It's the granddaddy of them all when it comes to resizing your photos. But the technology was getting kind of old, so we built a brand new AI-based resizing algorithm or interpolation algorithm. It can actually take a small photo or even a big photo and blow it up much bigger with greater detail and sharpness than ever before. It's crazy what it can do. This time I'm working out of Photoshop, you'll notice. So if we look at this starting photo, it's not very big. Let's go to image size. This is pretty small. It's only about 2,000 pixels on the long side. Not a very large photo. To send a photo from Photoshop to one of the plugins, it's very similar to what you do in Lightroom. We're just going to go down to File, and instead of Plugin Extras, we'll go to Automate, and then there's all those plugins right there as well. So I'm just going to send it to Resize AI. You notice when it opens up, we'll see the same size that we just saw over there in Photoshop. And now it's time to resize it. Now, for me, the best way to resize is to start off with one of the presets on the left-hand side. Oftentimes, I know exactly what I want to do. Let's say I want to make a 20 by 24 that I want to send to my lab to be printed. So I'll go down to Photo Lab, and I'll pick the 20 by 24 option. That's going to pick the crop box. It's going to load that 20 by 24 size in. It's going to pick the right resolution, the right amount of sharpening, everything I need. All I got to do is just crop and recompose my photo. And if the proportions happen to match, I don't even really have to crop, but most of the time the photo's proportions don't match the paper size proportion. So this lets me kind of kill 3 birds at once here. So I'm going to just pick that. I'll hit my apply button. And now let's zoom in and take a look at the results. You notice how it's now up to 7,000 pixels instead of 2,000 pixels. Yeah, almost 400% in size. Let's zoom in here. This is really close. I'm going to close this preset drawer on the left so we have a little bit more room to look around with, and I'm just going to pan over to maybe a more interesting spot in the photo here. So that's the original, that's the before pixels. I'm going to let go and see how quickly that preview updates with the final results. It's much sharper, much greater detail on all those tiny little, I guess they're hairs. I'm not an entomologist, but yeah, whatever they call those little things.
I'm just going to say textures.
Yeah. Let's take a look at another spot here.
Wow.
And bam, it's amazing how detailed those become.
And it's almost 4 times the size.
Yeah, it's almost 4 times the size. If we were to compare that to what it would look like if we did the same thing in Photoshop, we can actually do that. I'm just going to go down here to my settings pane, and I'm going to switch from the Resize AI algorithm. I can also use bicubic. I can also use the old genuine fractals algorithm if I still love it. But let's take a look at the difference. Here's bicubic if we just use that. You can see it's much softer.
Yeah.
You don't have nearly the detail. And that's what you would get from almost any other application. I'm going to set it back over here to resize and look at the difference.
Yeah, it really pops.
It really pops.
Night and day.
Yeah. Now, Resize has tons of other great options in here to prepare your photo for printing. Not only will it help you crop it and scale it, but it also has the tools to sharpen it if you're printing on canvas, to add gallery wrap wings. If I need to tile my photo out into multiple pieces for making a large mural or mosaic, it can do that. And it has great batch processing capabilities built right in. So it really is the perfect last step to get your photo ready to print. All right, now let's take a look at Portrait AI next. All right, if you shoot portraits at all, you're gonna love Portrait AI. It can find every face in a photo and automatically analyze it and figure out the right amount of retouching that it needs. And I'm not talking about just smoothing the skin, although it does a great job of smoothing skin, but it can also find the eyes and enhance the eye, same thing with the mouth. Let's show you how it works here. So I've opened up this photo. I purposely picked a photo that had two different people in it because it can detect each face and do different things for them automatically. So let's start off with her face. You notice here in the Portrait AI pane at the top, it lists the faces that I found. I found two faces. So I'm going to start with her face. I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit closer. There we go. And I'm going to turn it on and off. So you can see that's just the base automatic retouching. It's found the skin, smoothed out the skin, it's whitened her teeth, whitened the eyes a little bit. Now, because this was shot in a pretty dark situation, they're kind of dark compared to the background, I want to brighten them up a little bit, brighten up her skin. So I'm going to come down to the bottom. I'm going to grab the face brightness slider, and I'm just going to bring it up a little bit. You can see it's almost like a little fill light. I can brighten up that face just a little bit. Let's do the same thing with her eyes. I'm going to brighten up her eye areas just a little bit as well.
Nice.
There we go, just like that. Now, I can go over and I can adjust him and use different settings for him. For him, we'll adjust the brightness of his eyes, and we'll adjust the brightness of his face a little bit. And I can also turn down the amount of retouching. This is a personal choice. I can control how much I want. He's got kind of that great stubbly beard, so I want to have a little bit less retouching for him. There we go. Now, I've done all that portrait retouching right off the bat. Now let's show you something new that you can do in here. Let's go back to a fit view, and I'm going to go to my local adjustments tab. Local adjustments allow you to apply basic common adjustments to any portion of the photo. And now it used to be something you'd have to do with a brush, but we've included what we call Mask AI right inside of Portrait. So let's say I actually want to fix the lighting. I want to make them a little bit brighter. So watch what I can do. I'm just going to come up to the mask icon. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to say Apply to People. And I want to set it to Paint In. Oops. And now, down here in the exposure slider, I can just adjust how bright just they are. Look how crazy that is.
Yeah.
It's like a fill light after the fact. So I can dial in just the amount of fill light that I want. And I can do the opposite. This time I applied that filter to the people. I can also apply it to everything but the people. So if I wanted it to darken the background, I can do the same thing. I can just add another adjustment. This time, I will pick Paint Out and pick People. There we go. And now it darkens the background just like that. And again, I can control the ratio all I want to, just like that. That's pretty cool to be able to do that kind of portrait-based global tonal and color adjustments in here as well. I'll show you one other thing that I think is really cool too. The same technology that we use for content-aware crop to be able to fill those areas in is also used on a tool we call the Perfect Eraser for retouching. It's very powerful, but it's gotten a lot more powerful with this new algorithm. It's even more accurate than before. It's perfect for doing tough stuff like removing stray hairs. So I'm going to come over to here. You'll notice, I'm going to zoom in one more notch, that she's got several stray hairs going across her face. Now watch, I'm going to go to the retouch tools. I'm going to grab that Perfect Eraser tool. Watch, I'm just going to use a small brush and I'm just going to paint right across here. I'm going to go right across the hair. And watch, it's going to respect the edge of the lip and paint that little guy out. I'm going to do the same thing down here on the teeth. There we go. Maybe we'll even finish out the hair. Even across those wrinkles in her cheek, watch, I can paint right across, and it's going to fill those in and respect them. None of that smudging that we're used to seeing. She's even got a little lipstick highlight around the top of her lip that kind of bugs me. I'm just going to paint that little guy out too. Perfect. There we go. Now, I'm not going to waste your time doing all the other hairs, but it works exactly the same way. I just simply paint over those hairs with that tool, and I can get rid of things like stray hairs, power lines, much faster and with much better results than what you could in the past. All right, I think we got one more to go. Let's talk about On1 HDR. So for HDR, this is going to work inside of Capture One and inside of Lightroom, where you can select multiple photos, basically the photos from a bracket, and send it to HDR. Of course, you can do this as a standalone as well, just drag and drop the files on top of it. But here I have a series of photos, a bracket shot from from light to dark. And then we'll go to Plugin Extras, and I'll send it to HDR using the Merge with HDR option. That's going to actually send all of those original raw photos to us so that we have the full raw data. It's very important you have the raw data when you're creating an HDR rather than something that's already been rendered, so that we can then create a new HDR from it. And it's really fast. Watch how quickly it generates the preview for us. Most other HDR apps would take like a minute to get to this point, where we've done it in just a few seconds. The middle, you'll see a preview of the photo. At the bottom, you'll see all the photos in your bracket. They've been ordered from light to dark automatically. And I want to show you a couple important things you can do in here. First, you can pick which photo is used for kind of the base exposure. Kind of, do you want it to look light or do you want it to look dark? I've kind of picked the middle exposure, kind of an average exposure. And then I can also pick which photo I want to pick the detail from, if you will. So things move in photos, especially in HDR with long exposures. The water is going to look different. So I'm going to pick the shortest exposure. And if you guys look at the water, you can see how the water is mostly frozen in that one. Let me make this window a little bit bigger for you guys too. There's something else you can't do in most other HDR apps. You're stuck with a tiny little preview window. Yeah. So you see how the water is actually frozen in that exposure. Well, I don't really like the frozen water. I want that nice, smooth water, right?
Water.
So watch, if I pick the longest exposure, the one with the smoothest water.
Oh, there we go.
Look at there. So I can control the motion that I pick from whichever frame that I want. It's great for clouds. If I want moving clouds or I don't want moving clouds, moving water, not moving water, cars moving, not moving, things like that. I can preview the ghosting. That's basically the area that we're going to automatically smooth out for us and the ghosting amount. And of course, you're previewing that all in real time right here, so you're not making guesswork about what settings to use. So once I get everything set for the basics, I'm just going to hit the Save button. Now that's created that new HDR photo for me. And if we look here in the Develop tab, you'll see the exposure slider. And as I move that back and forth, you can see that insane range of tone that we have from light to dark in this photo. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do some quick little manual adjustments to my taste. I'm going to set my black point, my white point. I just hold down the J key on my keyboard. That lets me see where the blacks are at. And I want to do the same thing with my highlights, with my exposure slider. So I'm just going to adjust that until I don't really have any whites clipping. These are all just kind of personal adjustments. I actually kind of like it a little dark. Not quite that dark. And then I think the color is a little cool for my taste. So I'll come down, I'm just going to grab the dropper tool and I'll just click on one of those cool rocks and that'll neutralize the photo, set the white point for me automatically. And then I can fine tune that to my personal taste. Maybe I want it just a little warmer. This is pretty late in the day. There we go, something like that. Now, we've also brought over a lot of those great features that we've talked about in other places, especially like effects. So this will have content-aware crop. It'll have the improvements in the perfect eraser. It'll also have Super Select AI built in, so I can use that right here on my HDR photos as well. So I'm going to grab Super Select. Maybe I want to darken that sky even more in a selective way. I can simply click on that sky, right-click, and I'll apply an adjustment to it. In this case, I'm adding a raw local adjustment on top of it. I just want to bring those highlights down just a little bit, just like that. There we go. You can see how that's added an adjustment and brought down just the highlights, but it's created a high fidelity mask that respects the edge and even those tiny little trees in there. And because I'm saving this as a smart photo, all of my settings are non-destructive and re-editable. I can go back at any time from Lightroom and send it back in to HDR to make those adjustments. It's really a very powerful tool. It goes way beyond just creating HDR photos. All right, so that kind of gives you the gist of all the different plugins in the Professional Plugins series. It also talks about what's new in all of those guys. Let's see if there's some questions that we can answer for folks. Now, again, this is a recorded event, but we kind of have worked with our customer service guys and they said, all right, these are the questions we hear over and over again. So we thought it'd be a good time to kind of address them for you guys here.
And we are answering questions in the chat. So if you do have a question that you'd like to ask right now in the chat, feel free and we'll get to those as well.
All right, so the first question we get a lot is, what should I buy? Do I buy Photo Raw or do I buy the plugins? And if you kind of go back to what we talked about at the beginning, it really kind of depends on your workflow. If you're new to photography and you haven't picked a workflow application yet, or you're tired of the workflow application that you're using today, or you're just using the one that maybe came bundled with your camera, then Photo Raw is a great one to use. It covers everything: organizing, raw processing, special effects, layered workflow, printing, resizing, tethered shooting. You name it, it can do everything all in a single app, and it gives you end-to-end non-destructive workflows. Great place for batch processing, great place for printing. If you're already in an existing workflow, if you're already using Capture One, you're already using Lightroom, already using Name the Tool, then the plugins might be a better solution for you. Or we have a lot of customers that actually will use both. We recognize that everybody's workflow is a little bit different, and there's no reason to pigeonhole yourself into one workflow or another. If it makes sense that you happen to use Photoshop and you want to use these as plugins to Photoshop, but you use Photo Raw for the majority of your workflow, you can use both hand in hand. And a lot of people will do that, and that's a great solution for folks. All right, next question we get is kind of a, hey, how much do they cost? I've got an old version, can I upgrade? Should I buy them? Should I subscribe them? That's a very complicated thing to answer in a general environment like this, because everybody's situation is a little bit different. The best way to find the best price for you is to go to the website, on1.com, log in with your account, and you'll see the best upgrade offer available for you, or the best price to buy new for you. Now, whether you want to buy or subscribe is also a personal choice. We will always allow you to buy the products and keep them forever in a perpetual license model, but many of our customers are finding that a subscription is a better option for them. And there's a couple of reasons why. First off, you're always going to be up to date. You're going to have the newest version with the newest features always. Without having to worry about it, you're just going to automatically, it's just going to show up for you. A couple other big benefits that come along with it is you'll get Cloud Sync along with it. So Cloud Sync allows you to publish photos from your desktop to the On1 cloud, where you can then view them and edit them in the On1 mobile apps for iOS and Android, both on phones and tablets. It's a great way to share your portfolio or to capture photos in the field and have them automatically back on your desktop to be able to edit them in the apps that you already know how to use. Plus, when you subscribe, you'll also have access to On1 Plus, depending on the subscription package that you include. Plus, it gives you access to hundreds of hours of additional training made by this guy over here that'll give you all the ins and outs of not just our software, but also great tips on shooting in different scenarios. Whether you're shooting in the field or you're shooting macro in your home, Dylan's got great ideas and great education to help you guys get the most out of your photos.
It's a super fun time, and like what Dana was saying, lots of great educational tips, but it's also sort of a community as well. There's lots of photographers on there sharing their expertise and talking about photography and gear and things like that. It's just a great time if you're a photographer, and if you're into On1 Photo Raw or any On1 plugins, it's just a great way to learn some extra tips and tricks.
Yeah, and being able to talk with other like-minded photographers, sharing your photos through the galleries, sharing ideas, asking questions. Hey, I want to go to Yosemite. What's the best time of year to go? And people will tell you the best time of year and the places to go and the scenes to capture. So,
and they'll have great tips on that too. So yeah, I would definitely recommend On1 Plus for those of you looking to venture out a bit more into your photography and the photographic community, for sure.
Yeah. All right, another question is, can you do batch processing? And yes, you can definitely do batch processing in a couple of different ways. Depends on how you're working. As I mentioned, for me, for batch processing, I think Photo Raw is the best place to do it because it's a complete end-to-end non-destructive workflow. So it's very easy for me to take a whole bunch of photos, add a bunch of non-destructive settings, and batch them out into whatever folder, structure, file name, type, you name it. It's a workhorse when it comes to batch processing, but you can still batch process with the plugins as well when you're working through Capture One or through Photoshop Lightroom Classic. Both of those will allow you to do batch processing with them as well. The workflow is a little different. You'll pick the photos that you want, you'll send it to Effects or to whatever plugin you want to work on, and it knows you're working in a batch mode and asks you, hey, do you want to use the same settings on every photo in the batch, or do you want to go through and adjust each photo one at a time instead? So different way of batching, still batch capable.
And same results.
And same results, of course. Yeah. All right. Another question we get is, are they going to work with my application, or are they going to work on my computer? And again, that's a tough one to answer, but I can give you a better idea by looking at the tech specs for these guys. So this will tell you what you need in terms of operating system and computer hardware, and what third-party hosts are supported in here. The best rule of thumb I can give you is most of the image processing is done in the GPU or the video card on your computer. So having a good video card will give you better performance. The results are going to look the same one way or the other. But you probably want to make sure you have at least 2 gigabytes of VRAM. It needs to support DirectX 12 and DirectML and Vulkan 1.1 and OpenGL 4.2. almost any video card made in probably the last 8 years will meet those requirements unless it was on a very inexpensive Windows laptop. And pretty much any Mac computer in the last 10 years will probably support these requirements as well. If you're not sure, check your system specs and see. Just because the specs say you can doesn't necessarily mean your drivers are up to date. It's very important to make sure your drivers are up to date from the manufacturer's website to make sure that all those great features are actually unlocked in your hardware. Same thing when it comes to third-party applications. Staying up to date on those, making sure you have the most current versions and that are up to date will give you the best results, best performance when using the plugins as well. And in terms of the ones that we support, there they are again. Will work as a standalone application, will work as plugins for Photoshop and Photoshop Elements. Those work the same way, as well as Lightroom Classic, Capture One, Affinity Photo, Apple Photos, and Corel Paint Shop Pro. I did have a couple quick other new things to mention. One is the new On1 Application Manager. This allows you to sign into it, see everything that you own in your account, both products and subscriptions, download them and update them seamlessly. It's the best way to make sure that you're staying up to date. And you can also now see your in-app notifications right inside of the Learning Hub. So when you launch the app, the Learning Hub gives you access to your monthly rewards. Everybody who buys On1 products get monthly rewards from us. The most recent tutorials, your notifications, and if you're a Plus member, all of the great things you can access through Plus right there inside of the Learning Hub. All right, I think that just about wraps it up. We've explained the 5 different plugins in the Professional Plugin series. We've told you how they work and what's new in the 2023 versions of them. We've also kind of demystified the difference between Photo Raw and the plugins and which one you should get, or maybe both in a subscription, makes the most sense for you. Dylan, did I forget anything?
No, not at all, Daniel. If you have any other questions or we forgot to mention something, please seek out those FAQs. Also, our tech support team if you have any questions. But again, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it and have fun editing in the new On1 plugins.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great one. Bye-bye.